Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. Unfortunately, I find myself in the throes of another eating disorder attack. So I'm recording this at the beginning of spring 2025. I haven't had a very healthy relationship with food for quite a number of months. And it all started last fall when I was heartbroken. I had just had a very rough summer, and I decided I needed to network more with people, but I didn't know how. And I, I would go to various meetup groups and I would sit down at the tables, and all of the eyes would point away from me. I wish I had recorded some of this. It would be really comical to go back and watch. But just imagine me sitting at the end of the table and all the eyes pointing away from me. Or sometimes I would show up early so that I could grab a seat in the middle of the table, but all the eyes would go around me. And that was not, that whole season, that was not an uncommon circumstance. And that's why I offered that reward, as you guys remember, because I figured I had to break through of that and jump to the other end of the situation where I've already met somebody, right? I just have a hard time getting there. Once I get my foot in the door, I usually don't have a hard time keeping relationships. I have a hard time starting them, much more so than keeping them, I would say. And so I was in a state of emergency at that point. You got to remember last summer what happened. I was sick with long COVID, heat wave, all alone. I would be sitting at home, and every time I would turn on the radio, Taylor Swift would sing "Cruel Summer," and it sounded like she was singing about my life. And I'll never forget that sentiment. I'll never forget it. And so I felt like I was in a state of emergency. That the eating disorder could wait, right? That's the sentiment that I had, and I kind of allowed myself to go back to eating because I figured I got to solve this problem first. It was a state of emergency at that point. Well, I met a few people, I gave out a few rewards, and I'm starting to do better. But you got to remember, I'm very introverted, so going out with even with somebody who cares about me is like the equivalent of a very tough mental workout, right? Think about the toughest mental thing you've ever done. Maybe it's a public speaking event or a job interview that you're nervous about. Maybe it's going to take a SAT exam, right, or a driving test. One of my students was just getting ready for his driving test, right? When I go on a first date, you can just multiply that by 1,000. And so when I'm doing that, the last thing I want to think about is worrying about my eating disorders. Again, another state of emergency right there, right? I can worry about the eating disorder later, right? Right now, I'm dealing with a long distance relationship in Taiwan, and every time I open my Instagram, it's like, gee, am I gonna put in the right codes to make sure the bomb doesn't go off, right? I've had too many relationships end because of subtle things, right? Nothing that I could even explain or that she could explain or that sometimes I'll confide with a trusted friend. Hey, do you know what I did wrong? And they'll look at it, my chats, my interactions, and it's nothing that anybody can explain, right? So a couple weekends ago, I had met a girl just locally, and I made the mistake. We had been talking on a Wednesday about a hike that we had planned to do on Saturday, and I decided that I needed to give her some space. And I didn't text her back until Saturday morning, and she said, "Oh, I forgot to put aside some time for that," right? And I believe her. I mean, but it's one of those things that I wasn't sure if I should have texted her on Thursday or on Friday. If I did, I might have annoyed the fuck out of her, right? I've done that before too, right? So and things like that, right? The fact that every time I open my Instagram, it feels like I'm diffusing a time bomb can really drain on you, right? And as a result, I'm just not eating right anymore, right? Because I can worry about that tomorrow, and before you know it, the tomorrow that I said in September becomes March, right? That before you know it, right? It's very easy to do that, right? This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum.